The gift box trembled slightly in my weathered hands as I stood before Michael's imposing mansion. 3 decades of honest work had taught me to read people quickly, and everything about this house screamed exclusion. The marble columns, the pristine lawn, the electronic gates, all designed to remind visitors of their place in the hierarchy. "Dad, you made it!" Sophia's voice rang out like music as she appeared in the doorway, her engagement ring catching the light. Even her casual clothes couldn't hide the glow of a woman in love, though I caught something else in her eyes, a flicker of worry. "Wouldn't miss it, sweetheart." I kissed her cheek, inhaling the familiar scent of her perfume, the same brand she'd worn since college. Brought something special. Her curious gaze fell to the wrapped box. "What is it?" "Grandfather's watch. Thought you might want it for something borrowed." Michael emerged from the shadows of his palatial living room, wine glass balanced perfectly in his manicured fingers. His gaze swept over me like a security scanner, cataloging my pressed khakis and polo shirt, my best clothes, but clearly not best enough for his standards. "James." The handshake lasted exactly 2 seconds. "Still working at that? What was it? Italian place?" "Bella Vista," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Antonio's been good to me." His attention shifted to the gift box with the interest of an appraiser. "What's inside?" Sophia practically bounced on her toes. "Grandpa's watch. Dad, can I see it?" I unwrapped it carefully, revealing the gold pocket watch that had measured 3 generations of Collins men's lives. Sophia's eyes widened with genuine wonder, but Michael barely glanced at it. "Vintage," he said, with the enthusiasm of a man discussing property taxes. "Probably worth something to a collector." The casual dismissal hit like a slap. This wasn't about money. It was about legacy, about the steady tick of time that connected us to those who came before. But before I could explain, Aunt Mary's voice called from the dining room. "Dinner's ready, you two." The dining room was another monument to Michael's success. Crystal glasses caught light from an ornate chandelier that probably cost more than I earned in a year. Each place setting represented meticulous planning and unlimited resources. I took the seat Sophia indicated, feeling like an actor who'd wandered onto the wrong stage. The conversation flowed around me. Wedding venues, catering choices, flower arrangements, each topic a reminder of the financial gulf between us. "The planning must be exciting," I ventured. "How many guests are you expecting?" Michael carved his steak with surgical precision. "We're keeping it intimate. Close friends, professional associates." "My colleagues from the firm," Sophia added, then glanced at Michael. "Michael's business partners. Family, of course." "Of course," Michael echoed, but something in his tone made my blood chill. The conversation continued, but I felt increasingly like an observer rather than a participant. Michael's responses to my comments grew shorter, his glances more pointed, until finally he set down his fork with deliberate force. "James, I think we should discuss something." Sophia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "It's about the wedding," Michael continued, his voice taking on the authority of a boardroom presentation. "I've been thinking about the guest list, the atmosphere we want to create." My chest tightened. "What about it?" Michael leaned back in his chair, completely at ease with the discomfort he was creating. "My guests are influential people, tech executives, venture capitalists, city council members. This isn't just a celebration, James. It's a networking opportunity." "Michael," Sophia's voice carried a warning that went unheeded. "I need to be direct," he continued, his eyes locked on mine. "You're a waiter. My guests move in different circles. Your presence would be problematic." The words hit like a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands clenching involuntarily around my napkin. Around the table, silence settled like a heavy fog. "That's my father," Sophia said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "And I respect that," Michael replied smoothly. "But this wedding is an investment in our future. I won't risk my reputation because of misplaced sentimentality." I found my voice, though it came out rougher than intended. "I raised Sophia. I worked double shifts to pay for her education." "That was admirable," Michael cut me off with practiced dismissiveness. "But this is reality. You serve food for a living. My guests create jobs, fund startups, influence policy. Do you really think you belong in that conversation?" The room spun slightly. Sophia was saying something, her voice rising in protest, but the blood rushing in my ears made it hard to focus. This man, this stranger who claimed to love my daughter, was erasing me from the most important day of her life. Michael stood up, his decision final. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately. James, would you join me on the terrace?" The sliding door closed behind us with the finality of a judge's gavel, cutting off Sophia's protests from inside. Michael's terrace was like everything else in his world: expensive, designed to impress, emotionally cold. Below us, workers were setting up white chairs in the garden, stringing lights between ancient oak trees. My daughter's wedding preparations happening right in front of me, and I was being told I had no place in them. Michael positioned himself against the railing like a general surveying his domain. The garden backdrop framed him perfectly, every angle calculated for maximum intimidation. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" he gestured toward the city lights beyond his property. "This house cost me $2.3 million. The wedding alone is running $200,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $200,000, more than I'd earned in the past 4 years combined. 200,000? I struggled to process the casual mention of such wealth. "Yes." Michael's smile was sharp as winter ice. "Flowers are 15 grand. The photographer another 8. Sophia's dress cost $12,000. Each figure was designed to remind me of my place, to emphasize the vast ocean of difference between us." I watched the workers below, arranging chairs that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "I paid for Sophia's college," I said quietly, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. 4 years at Berkeley, worked double shifts, saved every tip, paid for her apartment when she graduated, her car. That was then. Michael's interruption was brutal. "This is now. She's my responsibility, and I'm telling you, your presence at this wedding would be an embarrassment." Through the glass door, I could see Sophia pacing in the dining room, her face twisted with anguish. She kept glancing toward the terrace, but made no move to interrupt, caught between loyalty to her father and love for her fiancé. "She's my daughter," I said. "She's my fiancé." Michael moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper meant to intimidate. "Do you understand what this day means? Senator Williams will be there, the mayor, CEOs whose companies could change Sophia's future. And you want to, what, serve them drinks?" The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. "My pride isn't wounded, Michael. It's intact." "Is it?" His laugh was cold, calculated. "Then why not accept that some doors are closed to you?" I looked down at the workers finishing their setup, row after row of white chairs facing an altar where my daughter would marry this man, where I apparently wouldn't be allowed to sit. "Because she's my daughter," I said finally. "And tomorrow, when she needs her father's blessing, I'll be here to give it, as hired help, as whatever it takes." Michael turned toward the door, triumph evident in his posture. "We'll see about that." As they left, Sophia cast one last apologetic look over her shoulder. "I'm sorry, Dad." "Don't be, sweetheart. Just focus on being happy tomorrow." Their footsteps echoed down the marble hallway, leaving me alone on the terrace with the night air and a growing determination. Michael Thompson was about to learn that some fathers couldn't be bought, threatened, or erased. The morning light felt harsh against my sleepless eyes as I drove toward Bella Vista. 24 hours until the wedding, and I had a plan that felt both desperate and necessary. The familiar route offered no comfort today, just more time to doubt what I was about to ask of my oldest friend. Bella Vista looked different in the early morning quiet. Without guests to perform for, the empty dining room felt honest, stripped of pretense. Antonio's SUV sat in the staff parking lot like a faithful guardian. Good. I needed this conversation before the lunch rush, before other servers arrived with their weekend energy and gossip. Inside, the coffee machine was already brewing, filling the air with the rich aroma of beans Antonio imported from his brother's farm in Sicily. He stood at the prep station, slicing onions with mechanical precision, his weathered hands moving in the rhythm of 4 decades in professional kitchens. "You're early," he said without looking up. "Saturday shifts don't start until 10. Couldn't sleep." I poured coffee into 2 mugs, adding sugar to his the way he'd preferred for 20 years. The ritual felt important, grounding, a reminder of the friendship that had sustained both of us through difficult times. "Antonio, I need to ask you something." He accepted the coffee, finally meeting my eyes. The lines around them spoke of long nights and difficult decisions, the weight of keeping a family business alive in an expensive city where rent alone could crush dreams. "What troubles you, my friend?" The words came harder than expected. "Tomorrow is Sophia's wedding." "Ah, yes, at the big house in Hillsborough. Very fancy." He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "You must be proud." "I am. But there's a problem." I leaned against the counter, choosing words carefully. "Her fiancé doesn't want me there." Antonio's knife stopped moving. "What do you mean?" "He thinks I'm not good enough for his guests. Too embarrassing." "Just a waiter," he said. The silence that followed felt dangerous. Antonio set down his knife, his expression shifting from confusion to something much harder. In his voice, when he finally spoke, I heard the echo of every slight he'd endured as an immigrant, every time someone had looked through him like he didn't matter. "This man told you not to come to your own daughter's wedding?" "Told me exactly that. In front of Sophia." Antonio's hands clenched into fists. "What kind of man turns away a father from his daughter's wedding?" "The kind who cares more about appearances than family." I took a deep breath. "That's why I need your help." His eyebrows rose. "What can I do?" "Hire me to work the wedding. Just for tomorrow. One day." Antonio stared at me like I'd suggested robbing a bank. "You want to work your own daughter's wedding? James, that's crazy." "It's the only way to be there. Michael can't forbid a waiter from working his event. I'll be invisible, just part of the service, but I'll see her walk down the aisle. I'll be there when she says her vows." Antonio returned to his onions, cutting with more force than necessary. The knife blade caught the morning light, flashing like his changing emotions. "This is not right," he said finally. "A father should sit in the front row, not serve drinks to strangers. Sometimes we don't get what should be. We take what we can get." Another long silence. Outside, delivery trucks rumbled past, starting their daily routes, normal Saturday morning sounds for everyone except me. "The catering company handles the service," Antonio said finally. "But I know the manager, Giuseppe Torino. We worked together years ago." My chest tightened with hope. "Would he add me to the crew?" "For you?" "Yes. Giuseppe owes me favors." Antonio wiped his hands on his apron, studying my face for doubt he wouldn't find. "You're sure about this, James? Once you start serving that man's guests, there's no going back. No dignity in retreat." "My dignity isn't in question here. His is." Antonio nodded slowly, 20 years of friendship reading the stubborn determination in my voice. Okay, I'll call Giuseppe this morning. You'll work the wedding tomorrow. Relief flooded through me like warm coffee on a cold morning. Thank you, Antonio. I won't forget this. You're a good man, James Collins. If that fancy son-in-law can't see it, that's his blindness, not your fault. The afternoon brought an unexpected challenge. I was adjusting table settings in Bella Vista's private dining room when voices from the lobby made me look up. Sophia's nervous laughter carried through the doorway, followed by Michael's commanding tone, discussing flower arrangements. They were here for the final walkthrough, and I hadn't prepared for this encounter. Dad? Sophia's voice floated from the doorway, bright with surprise and confusion. I turned, forcing a smile. Behind her, Michael's expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something much darker. What are you doing here? His words came out sharp, accusatory. Working. Antonio asked me to help with setup. Michael's face went rigid. You can't be serious. What's wrong now? Sophia stepped between us, her pre-wedding glow dimming. Your father is manipulating the situation, Michael said, his voice rising with each word. I told him not to come to the wedding, so he gets himself hired as staff. I'm here to work, I repeated, straightening another chair with deliberate calm. Nothing more. This is manipulation. Michael's control cracked like ice under pressure. You want to humiliate me in front of my guests. Stop it, both of you. Sophia's voice cracked with emotion. This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The argument continued, Michael's threats growing more elaborate, my responses growing quieter. When they finally left, the room felt heavy with unfinished business. But I was still standing, still hired, still planning to be there when my daughter said, I do. Whatever Michael was planning in retaliation, I'd be ready. 22 hours of waiting had led to this moment. The banquet hall gleamed under crystal chandeliers, every surface polished to perfection. White roses cascaded from tall, centerpieces like frozen waterfalls, their petals catching the evening light. I moved through this elegance carrying a silver tray of champagne flutes, invisible in my black vest and bow tie. The transformation was complete. James Collins, failed actor turned devoted father, had become simply the waiter. The first guests arrived precisely at 5. Tech executives in $1,000 suits discussing stock options like weather reports. Venture capitalists whose casual conversations involved millions. City officials whose handshakes could change policies overnight. Champagne? I offered the tray to a distinguished woman dripping in pearls and privilege. How lovely. Her smile was practiced, polite. What an elegant affair. Michael certainly knows how to host. Through the crowd, I caught sight of Sophia at the head table, radiant in her wedding dress despite the tension that had marked her special day. Michael stood beside her, greeting guests with practiced charm, though his eyes kept finding me across the room like a hunter tracking prey. An elderly gentleman in a perfectly tailored tuxedo approached my station. Excellent service, young man. You're very attentive. Thank you, sir. Would you care for an appetizer? He selected a salmon canapé with delicate fingers. You carry yourself well. Not many waiters have such natural grace these days. The compliment warmed me more than it should have. Natural grace. If only he knew the years of training that had created this ease of movement, this ability to navigate social spaces with quiet confidence. James has worked with us for many years, Antonio's voice came from behind me. One of our finest staff members. The gentleman nodded approvingly. It shows. Proper service is becoming a lost art. Across the room, Michael's laughter carried over the dinner conversation, but it seemed forced. His glances in my direction grew more frequent, each one carrying the same calculation, wondering when I might crack, when the humiliation might become too much. A young woman in stunning blue silk approached. "Excuse me, could you help my grandmother to her seat? She's having trouble with her walker." "Of course." I set down my tray and offered my arm to the elderly lady, guiding her carefully between tables. Her grateful smile reminded me of countless similar moments when courtesy wasn't just professional training, but natural instinct. "Such a gentleman," she murmured. "Your parents raised you well." The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had been gone for decades, and everything I'd learned about grace under pressure came from years of performing for audiences far larger than this one. As the dining room filled with Michael's chosen guests, I continued my service with increasing confidence. Each face represented influence and wealth, but they were still just people. People who responded to genuine courtesy and professional excellence. Then Michael stood, tapping his champagne glass with a silver spoon. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice carried easily across the space, "if I could have your attention for a moment." The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward the groom. I continued moving between tables, my trained hands steady despite the growing dread in my chest. Something in Michael's posture suggested this wasn't going to be a traditional toast. "Thank you all for sharing this incredible evening with Sophia and me," he began warmly. "We're surrounded by the people who matter most, colleagues who've built this community, friends who've supported our journey, family who've shaped our values." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Sophia beamed up at him, her face glowing with bridal joy and champagne. "Success in life," Michael continued, his voice gaining an edge, "comes from understanding your place, from recognizing what truly matters. We've invited people tonight who represent excellence, achievement, the very best of what our society offers." I paused near a corner table, champagne bottle frozen in my hand. The toast was taking a dangerous turn, which makes it important to acknowledge different levels of contribution. Michael's eyes found mine across the room. Not everyone reaches the same heights. Not everyone matters equally. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the warm, unifying message wedding toasts typically delivered. Take this man, for instance. Michael's hand gestured directly at me, causing every head in the room to turn. "James Collins. He's just a waiter. Never amounted to anything significant. Never built anything lasting. A man who peaked in his 20s and has spent 40 years sliding downward." The champagne bottle felt impossibly heavy in my hands. Sophia's face had gone white, her mouth forming a silent no of horror. Around the room, guests exchanged shocked glances, clearly uncomfortable with the cruelty unfolding before them. "He wants to be part of this celebration," Michael continued, his voice growing stronger, fed by the attention. "But the truth is, there are makers and there are servers, leaders and followers, people who matter and people who simply exist to facilitate the lives of those who do." I set the champagne bottle on the nearest table with careful precision. My hands remained steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs like a caged bird. "Some people," Michael's voice filled the silent room, "spend their lives dreaming of significance, while others actually achieve it. The difference is fundamental, unchangeable, natural selection in action." I straightened my bow tie and smoothed my vest, habits from another lifetime asserting themselves automatically. When I spoke, my voice carried clearly across the stunned silence. "Would anyone like more champagne?" The simple question, delivered with perfect composure, seemed to break Michael's momentum like a wave hitting an immovable stone. He stared at me, perhaps expecting anger, tears, or defensive justification. Instead, he found the same professional courtesy I'd shown every guest that evening. A few people nodded mutely. I retrieved my bottle and continued my rounds, moving between tables with the same graceful efficiency I'd maintained all evening. Each pour was precise, each interaction courteous and warm. Michael remained standing, his cruel toast hanging unfinished in the toxic air. The words had achieved their purpose, establishing his dominance, demonstrating his power to humiliate without consequence. But something in my calm response seemed to rob him of the satisfaction he had expected. An elderly woman near the window cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should eat dinner now." Others murmured agreement, grateful for any escape from the uncomfortable moment. Sophia pressed her napkin to her eyes, trying to preserve her makeup while processing the horror of what had just occurred. 15 minutes passed in artificial normalcy. Conversations resumed, but they carried a strained quality, guests working harder than usual to maintain festive spirits. I continued my service, offering second helpings and clearing plates with the same quiet efficiency. Near the far wall, a young man in his 20s sat scrolling through his phone, occasionally glancing at the television mounted above the bar. Bella Vista kept classic films playing during events, Antonio's touch of old Hollywood glamour that distinguished his venue from sterile hotel ballrooms. Something on the screen caught the young man's attention, causing him to lean forward and study it more intently. His expression shifted from casual interest to intense focus, his phone forgotten in his lap. I was clearing glasses from a nearby table when I heard his sharp intake of breath. "Oh my God," he said, loud enough to catch his companion's attention. "He's on TV." Several guests looked up from their conversations, following his gaze to the screen above the bar. The young man's excitement was infectious, drawing more eyes toward whatever had captured his interest. "That's the same man!" His voice carried clearly across the dining room. "The waiter!" The word rippled through nearby tables like a stone dropped in still water. Heads turned between the television screen and my position near the dessert station, trying to understand the connection being made. An elderly woman in an emerald dress peered over her glasses at the screen, then at me, then back again. Her face transformed with recognition and wonder. "I remember that film," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "He was wonderful. Such presence, such natural ability." More guests were turning now, drawn by the growing commotion. The television showed a young man in a naval uniform, his face earnest and hopeful, as he delivered lines to someone off camera. The image was crisp despite its age, every detail clear under the restaurant's careful lighting. "That's definitely him," another voice confirmed. 30 years younger, but absolutely the same person. I felt the weight of every gaze in the room settling on me like stage lights. The careful invisibility I'd maintained all evening evaporated in an instant, replaced by the uncomfortable exposure I'd spent decades avoiding. Michael's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, hitting his plate with a sharp crack that seemed to echo through the sudden quiet. His face had gone pale, mouth slightly open as he stared between the television and me. "Ladies and gentlemen," the young man called out, now standing in his excitement, "we have a genuine movie star serving our champagne." The revelation spread through the room like wildfire. Guests pulled out phones, searching movie databases and streaming services. Elderly attendees shared memories of seeing my films in theaters, their voices growing animated with nostalgia and discovery. "James Collins," one woman read from her phone, 7 major films between 1988 and 1995. Golden Globe nomination for Atlantic Crossing. Sophia's hands pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide, not with shame, but with dawning understanding. She was seeing her father's sacrifices through new eyes, comprehending for the first time the magnitude of what he'd given up for her future. I continued clearing the table in front of me, my movements unchanged despite the scrutiny. The young man on the television screen delivered his lines with passion and conviction, while the older man in the dining room simply did his job. "Why didn't you say anything?" a guest called out, his tone respectful rather than mocking. I looked up from the plates I was stacking, meeting his gaze with the same quiet dignity I'd maintained all evening. "Tonight isn't about me." The simple response seemed to deepen the room's fascination. Here was a man who had commanded theater screens, who had been recognized and celebrated, now serving champagne, without seeking recognition or special treatment. Michael remained frozen at the head table, his elaborate plans for dominance crumbling around him. The man he'd publicly dismissed as insignificant had just been revealed as someone who had achieved exactly the kind of recognition Michael desperately craved. Around the room, phones emerged as guests searched for clips and photographs, eager to connect their glamorous discovery with the gracious server who had impressed them all evening. The television continued playing, indifferent to the drama unfolding in its glow, while the room buzzed with excitement and wonder at the revelation that had just transformed everything. The room pulsed with excited whispers and pointing fingers. Guests huddled around phones, searching for clips and photographs, their faces bright with the thrill of discovery. I continued holding my empty serving tray, feeling the weight of every gaze, but maintaining the same professional posture I'd carried all evening. 7 films between 1988 and 1995, someone read aloud. Golden Globe nomination. I remember seeing him in theaters. The excitement was infectious, spreading through the dining room like ripples on a pond. I set my tray on the nearest table and slowly untied my apron. The simple gesture felt monumental, like removing a costume I'd worn for too long. "Yes," I said, my voice carrying easily across the suddenly quiet room. "That's me in the film. I was once an actor." The admission seemed to release something in the air. Guests leaned forward, drawn by the quiet confidence in my tone. "But when Sophia was born," I continued, glancing toward my daughter's tear-streaked face, "I chose family. I chose love over spotlights, steady work over uncertain fame. And I've never been ashamed of serving others, of honest work that paid for my daughter's education and future." Sophia pushed back her chair and moved toward me, her wedding dress rustling against tables as she navigated through the crowd. Other guests stepped aside, creating a clear path between us. "Dad!" Her voice broke on the word. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I reached out and took her hands, feeling their tremor through her white gloves. "The past doesn't define us, sweetheart. What matters is that I'm here with you on the most important day of your life." Tears spilled down her cheeks, carrying mascara and dark trails. "You gave up everything for me." "I gained everything," I corrected gently. "A daughter who became an extraordinary woman. 28 years of watching you grow, learn, succeed. No role could have given me that." Around us, the room had fallen completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had emerged from their stations, drawn by the emotion unfolding in their dining room. An elderly man near the windows stood first. "You're a true gentleman, sir." The words seemed to break a dam. Other guests rose, their applause starting tentatively but growing stronger. Soon the entire room was standing, celebrating not the revelation of a former celebrity, but the recognition of genuine character. "To James," someone called out. "To real men who choose family," another voice added. The applause continued, warm and sustained. I looked around at faces that had witnessed my humiliation an hour earlier and now showed nothing but respect and admiration. Sophia wrapped her arms around me, her wedding veil cascading over both our shoulders like a blessing. "I'm so proud to be your daughter." At the head table, Michael remained seated, his face pale and his champagne glass forgotten. The man who had publicly dismissed me as insignificant now faced the reality of what he'd done. Humiliated a respected actor in front of people who would remember this moment for years. Michael's approach to the microphone drew every eye in the room. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by the careful movements of a man navigating unfamiliar emotional territory. The cruel commander had been replaced by someone who looked genuinely lost. He tapped the microphone, and the room quieted instantly. Wedding guests who had been chatting excitedly about my acting career turned their attention to the man who had publicly humiliated me, curious about what he might say now. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael began, his voice lacking its previous authority, "earlier tonight I said things that were inexcusable. I want to apologize, especially to James." The silence was absolute. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their cleanup to listen. I was wrong. Completely wrong. Michael's eyes found mine across the room. "He's not just a waiter. He's a wonderful father, a man of genuine character, and someone who gave up fame to raise his daughter with love and dedication." His voice caught slightly on the words. The practiced businessman struggling with public vulnerability. I judged him by superficial standards, by income and social position, when I should have recognized the depth of his character. James Collins is more of a man than I realized, and I'm sorry it took this evening for me to see it. Michael paused, gathering courage for what came next. "James, if you'll accept it, I'd like to start over. Not as the embarrassing father-in-law I tried to hide, but as Sophia's beloved father, welcomed and honored in our family." The room held its breath. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my response to this public reversal. I walked toward the head table, my steps measured and calm. Sophia watched with tears streaming down her face, her hands pressed to her heart. "Thank you, Michael," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the quiet room. "Family is what matters most. Everything else is just noise." I extended my hand to him. He took it with both of his, the gesture more than a handshake. It was a bridge across the chasm his earlier cruelty had created. "I'm sorry," he whispered, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I was threatened by your relationship with Sophia, scared you'd make me look small by comparison." "You did that yourself," I replied gently. "But we can move forward from here." Sophia stood and moved toward us, her wedding dress flowing around her like clouds. She wrapped her arms around both of us, creating a circle of reconciliation that had seemed impossible an hour earlier. "I love you both," she said through tears of joy rather than pain. The room erupted in applause, but this time it felt different. Not the polite recognition of social obligation, but genuine celebration of authentic resolution. As the formal dinner concluded and the dancing began, Sophia took my arm with a smile that outshone every crystal chandelier in the room. "Would you honor me with the father-daughter dance, Dad?" "Always," I replied. As we moved onto the dance floor, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirrors along the wall. Still wearing my waiter's vest and bow tie, but somehow looking different. Not like hired help, but like exactly who I was. A father celebrating his daughter's happiness. The music began. "The Way You Look Tonight," our song from her childhood, and Sophia and I danced while wedding guests formed a circle around us. Michael watched with a genuine smile, his earlier arrogance replaced by what looked like gratitude. At the edge of the crowd, Frank Morgan appeared, raising his glass in a subtle salute to the man who had chosen love over fame and found both in the end. "I love you, Dad," Sophia whispered as we swayed to the music. "I love you too, sweetheart. Always have, always will." The song ended, but the embrace continued, father and daughter holding on to a moment that had almost been stolen from them. Around us, the celebration continued, not as the networking opportunity Michael had planned, but as something far more valuable, a genuine celebration of love, family, and the courage to stand up for what matters most. Michael approached as the next song began, his expression humble and sincere. James, would you join us for the rest of the evening? As family, not as staff. I looked around the room one final time, at the elegant tables I'd helped set, at the guests who had witnessed both cruelty and redemption, at my daughter who glowed with happiness and pride. I'd be honored, I said, removing my bow tie with deliberate ceremony. Antonio appeared at my side, his weathered face bright with satisfaction. 20 years of friendship had led to this moment of vindication, and his smile said everything words couldn't express. "You did good tonight, my friend," he said quietly. "Real good." As I folded my apron and set it aside, the transformation felt complete, not from waiter to celebrity, but from invisible servant to recognized father. The guests who had initially seen only hired help now understood they had witnessed something rare, a man who had sacrificed everything for love and dignity. Frank Morgan, my old acting colleague, approached with tears in his eyes. "James, you magnificent fool! Do you know what you've accomplished here?" "I've been present for my daughter's wedding," I replied simply. "That's all I ever wanted." "No." Frank shook his head, his voice thick with emotion. "You've reminded us all what real strength looks like, what genuine character means. Half the people in this room will remember tonight for the rest of their lives, not because they met a former actor, but because they witnessed a father's love in action." The music swelled around us as more couples joined the dance floor. Sophia spun in Michael's arms, her face radiant with joy that finally felt unforced. When the song ended, she ran to me again. "Dance with me one more time, Dad? Just us?" As we moved together to the gentle strains of Unforgettable, Sophia looked up at me with eyes that held new understanding. "All those years, you could have gone back to acting. You could have had everything again." "I had everything," I said softly. "I had you. But your dreams, your career. Dreams change, sweetheart. The day you were born, you became my dream. Watching you grow into this incredible woman, that's been the greatest performance of my life." She buried her face against my shoulder, and I felt her tears seep through my white shirt. "I'm sorry Michael said those things. I'm sorry I didn't stop him sooner. He was protecting what he thought mattered," I said. "Tonight he learned what actually does." As the dance ended, Michael approached us, his expression humble and sincere. "James, there's something else I need to say. To everyone." He moved back to the microphone, his posture entirely different from his earlier commanding presence. The room quieted again, but this time the attention felt welcoming rather than hostile. "I need to correct something I said earlier," Michael began, his voice carrying genuine emotion. "I claimed that some people matter more than others. I was wrong. What matters isn't wealth or status or connections. What matters is character, sacrifice, and love." He looked directly at me. "James Collins gave up a successful acting career to raise his daughter. He worked double shifts for 20 years to pay for her education. He chose family over fame, love over recognition. That doesn't make him just a waiter. That makes him the kind of man I hope to become." The applause that followed felt different from earlier. Not just polite recognition, but genuine celebration of authentic values. "To James Collins," Michael raised his glass, "the man who taught me that true success isn't about what you achieve for yourself, but what you sacrifice for those you love." The room rose as one, glasses lifting in unison. "To James." As the evening wound down, I found myself surrounded by guests who wanted to shake my hand, share memories of my films, or simply thank me for the lesson in dignity they'd witnessed. But the moment that mattered most came when Sophia and Michael approached together, hand in hand. "Dad," Sophia said, "we have something to ask you." Michael stepped forward. "James, I know I have no right to ask this after tonight, but would you consider moving closer? Maybe helping with the grandchildren when they come? We'd love to have you as part of our daily lives, not just special occasions. I looked at my daughter's hopeful face, at my son-in-law's sincere expression of regret and invitation. 6 hours ago, I'd been told I wasn't good enough to attend their wedding. Now I was being asked to be part of their future. "We'll see," I said with a smile. "One day at a time." As the last guest departed and the cleanup began, I helped stack chairs alongside the hired staff, no longer invisible, but choosing to serve because that's who I'd become. Antonio watched with approval as I worked, understanding that some transformations happen not when we change who we are, but when others finally see us clearly. The pocket watch gleamed in my hands as I presented it to Sophia one final time. "This belonged to your grandfather and his father before him. It's marked important moments for 3 generations of Collins men." She accepted it with trembling fingers. "What moment is it marking now?" "The moment when love won over pride," I said. "When family chose each other over everything else." Outside, the garden light still twinkled between the oak trees, illuminating the chairs where tomorrow's guests would gather for the ceremony. But tonight had already delivered the real celebration, not of wealth or status, but of the unbreakable bonds that define what truly matters. Michael appeared beside us, his expression thoughtful. "James, I have one more apology to make. I tried to bribe Antonio today. Threatened his business if he let you work tonight." "I know," I said simply. "You're not angry?" "Desperate people do desperate things. Tonight you learned you didn't need to be desperate." As we walked toward the parking lot, Sophia between us, I realized the evening had given us all something unexpected. Michael had learned that respect couldn't be bought or demanded. Sophia had discovered the depth of her father's love. And I had found that dignity, once earned, could never be taken away, only temporarily obscured by others' fear and insecurity. The pocket watch ticked steadily in Sophia's hands, marking the passage of time that had brought us to this moment of understanding. Tomorrow would bring the actual ceremony, but tonight had already delivered the real wedding gift. A family reunited by truth, strengthened by adversity, and bonded by love that no amount of money could measure. In the end, Michael Thompson had been right about one thing. There were indeed different levels of contribution to society. He'd simply been wrong about which level mattered most.